to the Talent Optimization Podcast, the go-to podcast for CEOs and HR professionals wanting to bridge the gap between the strategy and tactical implementation of talent optimization within their organizations. Through interviews, predictive index, and personal experience, your host, Tracy Shirk, helps you discover the facets of talent optimization from both a CEO and HR perspective to truly create the dream team for your organization. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Talent Optimization. We are talking about orientation and onboarding and how we bring on staff into our organization to really bring them into the tapestry of the organization and into the culture. With me today, I have a healthcare administrator and executive, Nicole Smithback. And Nicole is joining us with a very, very specific passion. She is passionate about the patient experience. She also is a certified patient experience expert through the Barrel Institute. So Nicole, welcome to Talent Optimization.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
So I'm so curious, what is it about creating an amazing patient experience that has everything to do with your staff?
Well, I think, so for me, where it really linked was I've been in my role a really, long time, fortunately, from clinic management, doing direct on the frontline training with every role from scheduling team members to call center environment to billing team members, clinical advanced practice providers, and up to physicians. Through a personal experience with an injury that was suffered from my husband, I really got to live both worlds. My professional and my personal lives collided. And while our care was fantastic by the clinicians, it was kind of everything that supported around that really created the space for me to think, wow, these team members aren't empowered to make decisions. They're not empowered to be able to impact the patient experience on the front line. And so I'm excited to share, again, just some really simple tips and tricks that we can do together as leaders to shift that ripple effect all the way through to your frontline teams.
So how do you shift that to your frontline teams so that staff can make those decisions at the ground level where they're specifically working?
So, a lot of specific measurables are, of course, there. It's having, very strategic, aligned goals, expectations that align with their position description and link back to what they're doing for the patient. And those are simple and they are impactful and they absolutely matter. But if the team member is not motivated by them and it's just their job description or just their performance expectations, they're not going to live those values and you can't do that for them. And so linking that in every conversation that we have, and it could be something as simplistic of, hey guys, do you understand if you're 5 minutes late in the morning that a patient needed to wait because of X, Y, and Z. And so we really bring every conversation, whether it's myself, my directors, or our team leads, we link everything back to the point that sometimes it's entertaining for our teams, but it's just kind of the culture, again, that we understand our why.
Yeah, absolutely. And that why is so incredibly important, not only in hiring, but in inspiring our staff and really onboarding them, because we know that very first kind of touch taste of an organization that they have can set the tone for the rest of the time that they work there. And that could be a really, really long time. We hope
Hopefully. Yes.
Absolutely. So how do you blend those cultural values into your onboarding process with new staff?
So I think it depends on a couple of things. So there's the new staff member, but there's also the existing staff member that while I'm intricately involved in as much of the hiring and onboarding as I can be, I also understand that a large portion of that has to shift to my team members. I'm not clinical. And so I've really had to bridge that gap to understand every situation that they're put in, even though it's, not my scope to do the work, I know the work. What I start with is, for example, if it's a technician, is I really ask the team members that I know are going to be their integrate circle right away, who's excited about training? Because I certainly don't want to put them with somebody who, is a really strong technician, but they're not a great educator. And so finding that out about my team members before I throw them to the wolves and just expect them to onboard or just expect them to train, because some people just don't love that. And they're not going to give a good experience to that new team member as they're joining. If you just say, hey, follow me, and then you do everything and don't actually link why you're doing what you're doing for the new team member to understand that.
Absolutely. And that really goes to, hey, what are the behavioral traits that a job needs for an individual to perform them incredibly well? And what are the behavioral traits that the individual has? When we can match those two things together, we're going to ensure that the individual is aligned to the role that they're hired into,
100%.
Which is the goal, right? But we have to take that over into our orientation and onboarding, because we want to onboard them the way that they need to be onboarded as well. Mm-hmm. So, one of the things that you mentioned a minute ago was how you are really empowering your team through bringing in team members that have been long-term team members with your organization to kind of be that orientation buddy to that new hire. So how do you really empower your team members at every level of the organization?
So again, I think you have to know them. And so for me is I try very hard not to assume. And what I mean by that is I may have a team member, if you come into me, Tracy, and you say, Nicole, I'm really good at what I do. I meet all my expectations, but I don't want more. That's okay. Mm-hmm. And I think earlier in my career, that was difficult for me when I could see somebody who had so much potential to do really great things. They didn't want it. And so while they did what they did and they did it incredibly, I really had to stop and learn as this young, whether it was my manager role or wherever my hat was, I had to learn to ask them and not assume. And
Absolutely.
So, engaging them at each level of, if somebody is I think of right now, one of our strong manager team members started as a reception and, kind of learned every single thing there was to do about reception. And then she got nosy, appropriately nosy, meaning I love nosy team members, where she would say, I want to know why. I want to know why. Why did we do it this way? And so she grew and literally created her own position description. And I think how exciting is that for her, that she now oversees our scheduling teams as well as does our billing for everyone and learned that because she was thirsty for it. We also have another team member who's been in a front desk role that while she wanted a little bit more, she wanted to learn more, but she didn't necessarily want a new position. So we were able to shift her to a different department. So she could still keep the skill set she was comfortable with, but there's nothing about her that wants to lead others. Again, I have to meet them as their leader for them to know and trust me that I'm going to follow their lead. I'm going to push them, but I'm going to support them in what's important to them at this chapter of their lives.
Absolutely. And so much of that is when we're bringing individuals into an organization is asking the questions to know where they want to go and need to go so that you can push them as far as they need, but not past that. But it's also creating almost two talent pathways inside of an organization. We have a talent pathway that's really an expert pathway, and we have a talent pathway that's a leadership pathway, because we're not all meant to be leaders of people. Sometimes we're meant to be amazing experts in our area. And as organizations, we need to create those pathways. Otherwise, we lose amazing talent and we can't optimize it well.
Completely. And it's so fun to hear when others say leaders, right? Is I think somewhere over the last 5 to 10 years, we created this. If you're a team lead or a manager, you're a leader. And to me, a leader is not a position description. It's not a job title. It's your character. And you don't have to be an administrator or an executive to be a leader, and to understand that those team members that aren't in a identified leadership role are just as vital to the success of our patient experience.
Absolutely. Because they're the individuals that are meeting the patient where they're at every single stage of the process, right?
Yeah.
So when you talk about patient decisions and onboarding new staff, how do you really work with them to ensure that they understand the impact of a patient experience by having an amazing onboarding experience?
Great question that I think is, I'll try and be concise because I could go on this one. But I think, again, is depending on what your role is. And I've been fortunate enough to work with teams for primary care, teams with surgery, urogynecology, OBGYN. So, my patient experience level is from all different experiences and pathways, whether it's inpatient or outpatient. And again, if you can't truly remember how to link, why did you choose healthcare? Why did you choose whatever your current role is? Somehow as an administrator, that's my role, is to help the team members do that. And so that could be as simplistic as realizing what is passionate, or why are you passionate about. If you're a nurse, why did you choose that role? And again, it's different for all of us. It's some people pick it because of the salary. Some people pick it because they want flexibility. Some people pick it because their grandma was and their mom was, and so to remember what it's like on both sides of, again, your why as a professional, but also the patient experience. And when we're onboarding a team member, you have to really link everyone, as we chatted earlier, whether it's the HR and the recruitment team, whether it's the administrator, the team lead, or the staff around them, that we all understand that we have the same goals. And sometimes you are in a space where you're recruiting as fast as you can, right? We're healthcare. Right. And exactly. So I know your background, there's times that you're thinking, holy smokes, I got to fill this position and I got to do it fast. And those are the times that I think you have to take such a deep breath and step back, because you can't just hire the first person to come in, and it has to be somebody that is going to stay, because we could do a whole nother podcast, right, on the cost of turnover, on all of these things that will keep ourselves so back in for time. But, is really being thoughtful again on linking your why to your organization's strategic value, thus impacting the patient experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then as we're onboarding and orientating new staff, it's the same thing as, oh my gosh, we've got to get this person in really fast because we've got 3 holes on our schedule. Well, guess what? If we don't take the time to really understand what is it that they need to know, and how do we link these values of the why into what they're doing, because it is so much easier to orientate and train individuals on day one to get things right than to retrain them 6, 7, 8, 9 months, weeks, years later. So
absolutely
right the first time, right? So again, some of that just comes down to the planning and having the processes ahead of time. And some of it comes down to, I believe, really, working with our leaders to say, what is it that you need and how can I help to support you to be successful? Is that what you have found in your experience too?
Absolutely. I've been in, large academic medical centers, and I've been in private practice.
Yeah.
And so often, especially when you are fortunate as a administrator to have tenured staff, so often you hear, well, that's just how we do it. And so much of it is, in their head, because they just know it, they live it, they breathe it, and they've done it for so long. But to explain that even a brand new nurse or even a brand new experienced billing team member, when they come into a new culture, they want to aim to do well. And so to just hear things in their orientation and not have something to reference their success, meaning a checklist, meaning a whatever that may be, I think that gets lost in onboarding, because you get them with their mentor, and you pair them with their mentor, and they go and they learn and they're excited. And so often we're healthcare, right? So a solid 60% of what we do is jump in and just figure it out, right?
True.
Again, we follow our protocols and all of that, but because often there is a short staff, I think of some physicians that I've worked with in the past that at 2 weeks, they're chomping on the bit on why their scheduler is still shadowing somebody. And while they're still doing some work by themselves, I'm sitting in the back going, at a week and a half, 2 weeks out, I can't possibly expect a scheduler to have free reign of everything without any questions. And
right.
I think of that role particularly is so passionate for me, because I think it's probably one of the most, I'm trying to think of the right word, like undershot positions. And what I mean by that is I hear often when I'm interviewing, or my HR team members will come to me and say, hey, Tracy's a great candidate. She wants to step back in her career and just take a position as a receptionist. And I go, hold on. I think it's really important that we educate people, especially in the last however many years, 10 to 15. Our front desk team members are not just scheduling and answering the phones. They're doing prior authorizations, they're doing chart prep, they're doing billing, it's so much bigger than answering the phone and putting a patient in at 9 a.m. tomorrow. And so literally when I interview, I share with them, hey, here's what a day in the life is going to be like for you. If I can get them to shadow, I absolutely want them to do that before they accept the position. But I let them know that, hey, I know this is what if you've never done it before, of course, not with an experienced medical reception team member, they know the drill. But if they're new to medical, I really let them know, again, this is almost a role of front desk management. Even if you're not a manager, you're almost a care coordinator without the care aspect or without the nursing aspect,
Right.
It's been very common in my career. I would love to hear, from some of your listeners or you too, is when they're 3 or 4 weeks in and they're thinking this was supposed to be a step down job. This is supposed to be my second career. And they're in my office in tears because they feel incompetent, and they're not. They just didn't think it would be as tough as it can be. And those are really open relationships that I've got to establish, that they, instead of feel like they're failing, that they can come into my office and say, it just happened. The thing you told me about that I was going to feel stressed out on week 3 or wherever that point is for them, it happened, and they're prepped for it instead of feeling embarrassed.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes to, we're also setting not just the performance expectations, but we're setting the expectations of how we handle failure, right?
Absolutely.
We're setting the expectations of what our culture is to support our team members as they grow into their role, and not setting expectations that are unrealistic.
Absolutely. Because you're going, again, I'm going to focus on a scheduler because that's just what we're chatting about. You're going to schedule somebody wrong. It's going to happen.
Absolutely.
You're going to cancel the wrong appointment and Tracy's going to show up. It's going to happen. But really helping, I think with healthcare, one of the things that's been really passionate for me is we've shifted nationwide towards a little bit more, and I'm very passionate about quality and initiatives as well, but we're also not widgets. And so you've got to blend quality outcomes with good best practices, and remember that we're humans. And that's always been a balance that I'm really proud of the teams that I've worked with, that we've been able to figure out that recipe pretty well.
Right. And that remembering that we're humans comes right into that orientation process of, hey, ensuring that we know there's expectations to the job, but we are giving the best quality service to other people, and we're that to each other in our team.
100%. Yes.
And I'm so curious, as we wrap up our conversation today, is what would one key actionable takeaway be for executives listening into this conversation about onboarding new staff? Like, what's one thing that they could take away and implement into their organization?
Great. So I think for me is to really suggest for our executives and those peers that, are out there in the community, is really focusing on being involved in the actual onboarding of team members. And that doesn't necessarily mean something as quick as just doing lunch with them on the first day and then you don't talk to them again. That doesn't mean, that you're always there with them, doing the actual training. But if you've got the ability to slot into their onboarding schedule and you're actually part of developing that schedule so that they understand why the tasks that they're doing serve your patients and serve your strategic values, I think is really important.
Absolutely, because that's going to serve you later on because 100%. They understand the culture. Awesome.
Yeah. And I think building on that, maybe not necessarily on day 1 or day 2, but helping the new team member understand autonomy in their decision making, and that you want them and that you hired them for a reason to represent the organization that you're with to the patient. And so what I really try and encourage is that they understand that they can make decisions without needing their manager or coming to me or whatever that is, on the patient experience. Of course, we're here. We're absolutely here. But there's nothing worse. I think we've all been a patient or a family member when someone says, you're frustrated with your care and they say, let me give you a card to call our patient relations team. Right. Let's empower them to do the de-escalation on the front line. And if they know that from the day they start, that I'm going to trust their decision, I'm going to trust that they're making decisions that align with our mission and value. Again, they're more engaged in problem resolution instead of here's a card and walking down the hallway.
right? And they're more engaged in their job and they're more
Mhm.
fulfilled in their work because we all want to have that fulfilling work where we know we make a difference.
Absolutely. And they want to fix it for the patient, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I think they just sometimes you feel we're all overwhelmed. We're all busy. Let's not even add the pandemic right now,
Right.
but your hands were tied before in some cases. And what I mean by that isn't that they were tied to not impact decisions, but we're just so busy and it's really easy. And I've done it too, where it's let's get through the next thing. I gotta just run through my next task because everybody feels that pressure regardless of what your position is. So stopping and acknowledging that I think is beneficial.
Absolutely. So I'm going to flip this now. So
Okay.
what's one key takeaway that our human resources listeners can really implement into their organization from our conversation?
Excellent. You know what I think is number one, I would say having the conversation with the impacted leaders or designated leader roles of the newly recruited position before you start recruiting. You need to know what are your administrators looking for? What does their team
Right.
need? I like to think of it as my job is not, I don't need 6 Nicoles. Absolutely not. That would be terrible. And I'm really big picture. So I tend to look at things from a larger scope. So I know the teams around me that if I'm fortunate enough to build them, or inherit really great ones too. I know I need to get somebody on my team that's very detail oriented because
Right.
I'm not. And I know that about myself. I'm always thinking 3 steps ahead, whereas my team is going, hold on, let's look at this. And your HR team for recruiting needs to know that about the team that they're bringing this person into so that they're able to, again, hire for the position and not just to fill the position, but long-term success. And then the second thing I think for our HR team members is to really understand how to align the goals of this position with the strategic goals of the organization from the beginning in every conversation they have, whether it's, the initial screening phone call, whether it's the in-person interview. I know every organization is different on HR's involvement. So making sure that you understand how to align that strategically.
That is such great insight. And what's so fantastic about it is it's really doing that kind of one-on-one talent strategy with a team and saying, hey, where are individuals on your team? Where are your balancers? Where are your individuals that are really supporting the team to meet that strategic mission so that you can execute it and get those outcomes that you're looking for while every single person's fulfilled in their work? Like that's like nirvana, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you feel it, I think anyone who's been in the hiring manager or, wherever you are, when you feel it and you feel your team shift and the excitement of when you've brought in a team member that doesn't replace anybody, but just adds this spark of excitement and communication that even when it was a strong team, I think of right now, the team I have is so strong and so fantastic in their communication, their clarity, they're all problem focused. And we have a new team member that actually starts on Monday. And the spark that I think she will bring to the team is going to be really great. And it'll be our team lead's first time onboarding since he's been with our organization. So I'm really excited for, again, those conversations to happen.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. So where can our listeners find you?
Primarily on LinkedIn at the moment. I've got a website, but it's not quite up and running.
Okay.
And so, I do a lot of my coaching and one-on-one conversations from LinkedIn conversations, and we can post that on your
absolutely.
podcast link. So
we'll definitely post that in the show notes. And for any of our listeners that are interested in a one-on-one talent strategy session to really talk about what are those different dynamics of the team? What is a balancer? How do we do those things? We'll put that link in our show notes as well. That's something that we'd be happy at Elevated Talent Consulting to have a further conversation with you about how do you really create that dream team. So Nicole, thank you so much for the conversation today and shining these little nuggets that are big nuggets with our audience.
Pleasure.
Yeah, we hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Optimization Podcast. You'll find more tools and resources for CEOs and HR professionals looking to bridge the strategies versus implementation gap of talent optimization at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. We've also created a free, valuable resource for you to begin bridging the gap called the Talent Optimization Foundation Membership Program. You can access it for free at elevatedtalentconsulting.com/foundation. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode to learn more about talent optimization and creating a dream team for your organization.